Back with the WMAY Morning Newsfeed. Earlier, we talked with Adam Andrzejewski of OpenTheBooks.com about all of the leftover hardware that taxpayer-funded U.S. militaries left behind under the Biden administration, and it's pretty staggering. To talk about that and other things going on in Congress, we're joined now by U.S. Representative Darren LaHood. Representative, thanks for taking time with us, and I guess let's start with Afghanistan. I mean, hearing some of the things that have been left behind, not just, I mean, it's horrible to hear about Americans who are stranded and Afghan allies who are stranded, but we also, according to the weaponry that Adam Andrzejewski's been able to highlight, it seems we've armed a terrorist group with sophisticated weaponry. What is going on here?
Well, Greg, thanks for having me on. Good to be with you and your listeners. Listen, this whole thing with the Biden administration is an abject failure of leadership. And if you look at the numbers, it is staggering. We have given the Afghan army $85 billion over the last several years. But what does that mean? That's 600,000 in weapons. That's about 75,000 vehicles. That's 200 aircraft, including Black Hawk helicopters, Humvee vehicles, but also things like night vision goggles, military drones that are all now in the hands of the Taliban. And that is frightening and scary. And again, they basically retreated, and all those weapons are now in the hands of the Taliban, one of the biggest terrorist groups in the world. And so what happens with that? They could sell it to the Russians. They could sell it to the Chinese. They could sell it to the Iranians and the North Koreans. So it is really problematic. And then the other observation that I will make, Greg, is, as you know, I serve on the Intelligence Committee. And as I see what the Biden administration is doing now with the Taliban, I mean, it seems to me that it's a complete surrender to the Taliban. And all we're doing now is negotiating the terms of the surrender, asking the Taliban to let us keep the airport open, to let our Americans get through their checkpoints to come and fly out. This is not the position we thought we were going to be in, and it's really demoralizing.
We're talking with Congressman Darren LaHood here on the WMAY Morning Newsfeed about Afghanistan. And how do we rectify the situation? What's next? Can Congress do anything to implore the Biden administration to act a certain way, or is it just cut bait and try to reassess where we're at with the global war on terror back here at home?
Well, first of all, I think we have to get every American out of Afghanistan. We have an obligation and responsibility to do that. But it's hard to know how many are left there. We've heard mixed, opinion on that, on whether it's 5,000, whether it's 20,000. And again, this is the problem when you're negotiating with terrorists. And when we, it's interesting, Greg, President Trump got criticized because he was kind of going at it alone. He didn't work with our NATO allies. Biden has done more damage to our allies pulling out of Afghanistan without letting them know. I mean, listen to the Germans and how they criticize Biden, and the English and the French. I mean, we have basically abandoned our allies there. So what do we do now with a chaotic mess? Again, I go back to the first thing we have to do is get Americans out, get our Afghan allies out. We can't let the Taliban dictate the terms of that. They put a hard deadline of August 31st. Clearly, I don't believe that we're going to be able to get everybody out by then. So, it's a real mess, and Biden owns it now. We need to do everything we can to help to get those Americans out. But beyond that, I don't know what we're going to do. And the last observation that I will make, Greg, is what does this say to our allies, Taiwan, Ukraine, Israel, that we've said for so long, we have your back, don't worry about it, South Korea, that we're going to protect you. When you see what happened in pulling out and the disaster there, I think it sends a real sign of weakness around the world, and our adversaries are eating it up.
Congressman Darren LaHood with us on the WMAY Morning Newsfeed. Something else going on in Congress. We talked with the Center for a Responsible Federal Budget President, Maya McGinnis, and she highlighted, of course, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package and then the possible $3.5 trillion to $5 trillion program for domestic spending that's being debated. You guys were actually called back to take that up in the U.S. House. What's happened?
Well, I'm in D.C. right now as we talk this morning, Greg, and luckily there are a few moderate Democrats left in the House that are refusing to go forth with Pelosi and Biden's $3.5 trillion social infrastructure, human infrastructure, which essentially raises taxes. It raises taxes on farmers and small businesses and working families. And it's the wrong approach. So we're waiting to see whether the moderate Democrats are going to fold and go along with Nancy Pelosi. I hope they hold firm. We shouldn't be raising taxes coming out of a pandemic, Greg. Remember, it was just announced last week, we have 10.2 million unfilled jobs in this country. And now we want to spend another $3.5 trillion by raising taxes on small businesses and working families. Again, I can't think of a worse approach to our economy than doing that. But that's what Pelosi and the Democrats want to do.
Should they I know that Congress, as the State House, can chew gum and walk at the same time, but is the focus on this extra spending taking attention away from other things like what's going on in Afghanistan and auditing the full picture and making sure that people are held accountable for what happened?
Well, there are multiple, crises going on. I mentioned it last week at the State Fair. I mean, we have a border crisis. We have an inflation crisis. It's more expensive today, to buy a loaf of bread, to buy a gallon of milk, to fill up your car with gas. All under the Biden administration. And so, we have a crime crisis in many of our urban areas. So these things continue to multiply. And then, of course, Afghanistan here. But the bottom line is, Greg, what I've said is we got to get back to the economy we had pre-COVID, which is the best economy in my lifetime by every indication. People at the lower end were doing better, middle class, higher end people. And the last thing we ought to be is pouring more money into the debt. We're up to $29 trillion in debt with this latest infrastructure bill. We can't add any more money to that. Let's get back to normal, get off this sugar high of just spend, and fill in these jobs that need to be, where we need to fill in. Last point on that is, as I travel around my district, Greg, we can't find truck drivers, can't find welders, can't find people to work in restaurants, can't find people in manufacturing. The more we spend on unemployment benefits and giving away money, the less we're going to have people working.
Congressman Darren LaHood here on the WMAY Morning Newsfeed. Always appreciate you taking time with us, as I know you guys are busy over there. But when it comes down to it, you talk about these modern